Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're basically going to reverse engineer the DNA of the movies you already know and absolutely love. We're uncovering the legacy of cinema's emperor. We are talking about Akira Kurosawa. It's crazy to think about, but his path went from being a struggling, self-described failed painter to becoming Japan's most internationally influential director. So we're going to explore exactly what made his films so groundbreaking and, frankly, why they achieved such unprecedented global acceptance. But first, let's start with a question to really hook you in. What exactly connects a galaxy far, far away with those gritty, cigar-chomping gunslingers of the American frontier? I mean, it kind of sounds like the setup to a weird joke, right? But it's actually one of the absolute most important through lines in film history. And the answer to that question? It's Akira Kurosawa. He was a true visionary whose work directly shaped a whole generation of legendary new Hollywood filmmakers. We are talking about the heavy hitters here. George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola. All of them have pointed to Kurosawa not just as a loose inspiration, but as a direct mentor. His films literally provided the blueprints they used to build modern cinema as we know it today. So here's how we're going to deconstruct his massive pop culture influence today. First up, groundbreaking cinematic techniques. Second, weather as a character. Third, East meets West. And finally, a legacy in remix. Let's jump right into Section 1, groundbreaking cinematic techniques, rewriting the visual grammar. You see, instead of the seamless style of classic Hollywood narrative movie making, the ones that loved those smooth tracking shots and gentle dissolves, Kurosawa introduced this disruptive spatial geometry. Take the axial cut, for example. Rather than just seamlessly gliding in on an actor, Kurosawa would aggressively jump cut closer and closer along the exact same axis. It totally jolts you as a viewer, creating this sudden rhythmic intensity that, honestly, completely rewrote visual grammar. Now you might be wondering, how did he capture those massive, chaotic battle scenes so perfectly? Well, he pioneered having multiple cameras running simultaneously from different angles. In films like Seven Samurai, he'd have up to 3 cameras rolling at once. And this had 2 huge benefits. Number 1, it provided a massive amount of dynamic coverage for editing. But number 2, and maybe more importantly, it liberated his actors. Because they didn't know which camera was catching their face at any given second, they couldn't just play to the lens. They had to act completely naturally within all that staged chaos. And to take it a step further, he paired those multiple cameras with incredibly long telephoto lenses. We're talking up to 500mm lenses, which is huge, and he'd even use them for interior scenes, like in his film Red Beard. By using a lens that long, he compressed the spatial depth. It flattened the image plane, basically stacking the foreground and background action together into these dense, 3D-like tableaus. It gave his films a deeply painterly composition that, frankly, filmmakers are still trying to mimic today. Okay, so to tie all these dynamic shots together, he didn't rely on those gentle, sleepy fades. No, instead, he popularized what we now call the Kurosawa wipe. Using an optical printer, he created this sharp, horizontal slash right across the screen. Look, if you've ever seen Star Wars, you know exactly what this looks like. For Kurosawa, it functioned almost like a percussive drum hit. It was an edit that actively called attention to itself, aggressively propelling the whole narrative forward. All right, moving on to Section 2. Weather as a character, the texture of emotion. Contrasting standard Hollywood's clean, almost ballet-like choreography, Kurosawa choreographed mud, wind, fire, and rain. And I mean, he literally choreographed them. Weather functions as a primary antagonist in his work. He famously went so far as to dye the water black with calligraphy ink in Rashomon, just so the heavy rain would physically show up on camera. And for his late masterpiece, Ran, he had a massive real castle constructed on the slopes of Mount Fuji, entirely so he could burn it to the ground in the final scene. I mean, the dedication is insane. And his pursuit of gritty realism meant actors often faced genuine, terrifying danger on set. In Throne of Blood, he didn't use cheap camera tricks for the climax. Oh no, he had expert archers shoot actual, real arrows at his leading man, Toshiro Mifune. They were landing literally centimeters from Mifune's body. So you know the terror you see on his face on screen? Yeah, actually, that is not acting. Let's transition over to Section 3, East meets West, transcultural storytelling. So beyond all the camera tricks, Kurosawa was just a voracious consumer of global literature. He brilliantly took the structural discipline of Western literature, writers like Gorky, Dostoevsky, and famously William Shakespeare, and adapted them seamlessly into Japanese historical settings. He took Macbeth and fused it with the highly stylized techniques of Japanese no theater to create Throne of Blood. Later, he transposed King Lear right into the chaotic Sengoku period for Ran. This transcultural synthesis is exactly why Steven Spielberg called him the pictorial Shakespeare of our time. Kurosawa realized that human struggles, they're the same everywhere. His themes of universal humanism, like the dying bureaucrat desperately searching for meaning in Ikiru, could be understood in literally any society in the world. He genuinely considered movies as a gateway to another culture, providing a kind of deep understanding that reduces friction between different peoples. Which brings us to our final pillar today, Section 4, A Legacy in Remakes, The Global Echo. This cross-cultural exchange absolutely brilliantly illustrates the staggering one-to-one mapping of his influence. Seven Samurai directly became the classic Hollywood Western, The Magnificent Seven. Yojimbo was remade by Sergio Leone into A Fistful of Dollars, which practically kick-started the entire spaghetti Western genre and launched Clint Eastwood's career. And of course, the narrative structure of The Hidden Fortress laid the literal blueprint for George Lucas's original Star Wars. Kurosawa didn't just casually influence these genres, he actively provided their bedrock foundation. Across 30 feature films directed over 5 decades, Kurosawa achieved the absolute highest honors in world cinema. We're talking the Golden Lion at Venice, the Palme d'Or at Cannes, and an honorary Oscar for Lifetime Achievement. He proved that a struggling artist could become the most internationally influential director of his era, entirely by refusing to compromise his vision. Ultimately, Kurosawa argued that films should be approached as polyhedrons, basically objects with a dimensionality that allows them to be viewed from many, many different angles. His style teaches us to look at the human condition from multiple perspectives, challenging us to see the deep, underlying connections between totally disparate cultures. So, armed with the knowledge of his aggressive screen wipes, his intense telephoto compression, those multi-camera setups, and his relentless gritty realism, I want to leave you with this final thought. The next time you sit down to watch a modern blockbuster, will you be able to spot the Emperor's invisible hand guiding the camera? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep looking for those hidden connections on screen.